Well, my notion of what's going on involves a singularity, but only one. The orthodox story of how the universe got here demands a singularity as well. It's called the Big Bang, but again, revised after Hawking, only one. Well, so science puts its singularity at the beginning of the universe, and here is what it is. It is that suddenly, and for no reason, the entire universe sprang from nothing. It was definitely smaller than a dime. And granted that, we can explain everything. Well, I reasoned somewhat differently. I agreed that there would be a need for a singularity in a good model of what's happening. But it seemed to me that the singularity would probably be more likely to emerge out of a very complex set of preconditions rather than just springing from nothing. So I imagined that, well, why not put the singularity at the end of the life of the universe, when all kinds of complex things can have had ample time to evolve and put themselves in place. And then perhaps these complex things, whatever they may be, will generate a singularity. So, in fact, this is the notion. It's the notion that the whole history of the universe moves through a series of condensing stages, each stage requiring less time than its predecessor. And what these stages are is a gathering together of complexity. First, you have the emergence of primitive chemistry in the hearts of stars, and that occurs a long, long time after the Big Bang. And then somewhat shortly after that, in terms of hundreds of millions of years, you get exotic chemistries on the surfaces of planets, and then more quickly, life. And then rather shortly after that, consciousness, and almost instantly then, this. So what I take this to be is a leading toward complexity of all the processes in the cosmos as a set of nested entities. Now, what's very interesting about this is suddenly human beings are moved center stage in importance. Remember, I said that I thought the empowering of felt immediate experience was what it was all about. So suddenly, human beings, which in the scientific model are epiphenomenal observers, are centralized to the whole cosmogonic myth. Why? Because people, as we all know, are the weirdest and most complex objects in the universe. And throughout time, throughout history, we see that they become yet more complex and more bizarre through the generating of more and more codes, more and more bizarre interfacings with nature and self through technology, more and more self-reflection, more and more communication, more and more flowing together. Perhaps you can anticipate what this leads to. It leads to ever more frenzied historical existence, but it doesn't go on forever. You know, the general theory of history taught, say, at Cal today is called the pointlessly fluctuating theory of history, which is what it appears to be, except for this factor of embedded complexity, movement toward concrescence. I had an occasion to discuss this with Carl Sagan recently, and it was interesting. He pointed out that information has not moved faster since the discovery of radio. Radio moves at the speed of light. Since then, the plateau of the rate of information transfer, has been at a plateau. The largest atomic explosion ever detonated was in 1958. There's been none larger since, which is, I think, something you can think about in the middle of the night. And the fastest object ever created by human beings reached its top speed and continues to hold it in 1967. So what is it that is growing more dense around us, that we can see and feel in the literal complexification of our own lives? Well, I submit that it is connectedness, and that this is a theme which is not arising out of sociological factors. It's arising out of the bones of the planet itself. We are not caught in some kind of universe where human beings are completely outside the plan. Rather, I think history is somehow part of the plan. And by anticipating or somehow trying to come into resonance with what history's part in the plan is, I think we can lift the pall of existential doubt that is the legacy of modern thought. In other words, there can be a postmodern philosophy that is organic, biological, human-centered, humane, and even psychedelic. But now, what about this singularity? Isn't this simply the end of the world that the fundamentalists are pushing and that the Hindus trot out every once in a while? Is that what it is? Is this scholasticism wearing psilocybin clothing? Could be, folks. No, I don't really think so, though. The Mandayans, who are a very obscure religious cult and hence very dear to my heart, have a very interesting myth, which is their eschatology is they believe that at the end of the world a savior will come called the secret Adam. And the secret Adam, rather than teaching a message, will build a machine of some sort. They're very explicit about this. And the machine is a light pump for gathering souls together and projecting them beyond the machinery of cosmic fate and back to their awesome and hidden home in the harmony with the All-Father who is hidden. They love that sort of thing. In any case, this notion is very interesting, that somehow tool-making is a kind of salvational exercise, that somehow technology, which we have tended to abhor because in its present stages it is so toxic and vulgar and so badly manipulated and unethically manipulated, nevertheless, what it represents is a continuation of a process which seems to be very dear to human beings, which is the process of fashioning ideas into matter. And I think that what we're moving toward, if we can come out on the other side of the very narrow political neck, the crisis that looms ahead of us, because there is a historical crisis, make no mistake about it. But I'm speaking actually to a world that survives that crisis, a world beyond the century. And I think that world has a crack at allowing us to become what we wish to be, to project ourselves out of the monkey nature and to really explore what self-reflection means. This could easily turn into an outlandish nightmare. The challenge is very real. I know that many people who follow my ideas and come to these events are psychotherapists and psychologists and therapists of all sorts. There is a great responsibility here to the creation of the future image of the human mind. Psychotherapists and psychologists and therapists of all sorts. There is a great responsibility here to the creation of the future image of the human mind, because what we are moving toward is a technological singularity. In other words, the process of technology has been dominating our evolution since at least 25,000 years ago. For far longer than that, as a physiological type, we have been steady. There's been very little variance. But the proliferation of cultural artifacts has been ever increasing, asymptotically increasing now, toward the point that one can see that what is actually being proposed by whatever this force is that is driving the human unconscious and releasing ideas into the stream of historical time, what is actually being proposed is a full self-imaging of the soul. I've thought of this in terms of turning the human body inside out so that the soul is visible and the body becomes an object freely commanded in a realm which we call the imagination. These things are possible. This stuff is being labored toward in these tall glassy buildings all around us, even as we speak. Technology, information, transformation of coding, it has a life of its own. If you were an extraterrestrial staring down at this planet, you wouldn't see a human civilization. What you would see is a swarm of codes, some of them genetic, some of them electronic, some of them pheromonal, acoustic codes. Information is what's loose on the surface of this planet. Why? Why not? We have nothing else to compare it to. Perhaps this is what biology always ushers into, is this ever more intense, ever more accelerated self-reflection, self-expression. What is to be done with it? Well, I think that in a way it is doing what is to be done with it, and that a great deal of political education consists in standing back. What we are moving toward has a sense of itself. What we must provide is a channel of communication for a guiding image for the lives of each one of us, a guiding image for society. And what I think it is this, the felt presence of immediate experience. That's what sex is about. That's what psychedelics are about. It's what good philosophy, good food, decency, it's what all these things are about. The valuing people, valuing the moment in which you are in as a cog in a wheel. Not it was a great poet who said, it is not he or she or them or it that you belong to. There's something to that, I think. But in combination with this technological thing, it isn't simply a call to dignity and presence in the moment. It is a call to dream, because we are going to become whatever it is we wish to be. We stand on the brink of entering into a kind of hyperspatial dimension. The entire culture is poised on the brink of an ocean of imagination. The mind, which began, 50, 100,000 years ago, a tiny spark pulled forth out of the darkness in the dim recesses of these packed hunting primates on the plains of Africa, and then slowly, all that looking into the campfire, all those eons of boredom. Somebody had to invent canasta. No, the game which was invented, the game which invented itself, was symbiosis with plants. Out of this primate stock, there came one species that had the habit, the weird predilection for addicting to almost anything. To its mate, to its territory, to its place in a hierarchy, and to plants. And this symbiosis between people and plants is what gives us the legacy of our great religions. Soma, this mysterious vegetable concoction which drove the imagination of Vedic thinkers as they moved out of Caucasian Asia and into India over a 3,000-year period. The whole of the Rig Veda is a hymn to Soma. What are these things that drove these civilizations, the Osirian civilization of Egypt? Did it depend on tryptamines native in the local acacias? What is the relationship of ergotized beer or mushrooms to the Eleusinian mysteries which put their stamp on the thinking of Plato, Aristotle, Aeschylus, Aristophanes, the whole pantheon of Greek thinkers? And then you see in cold Europe a cultural aberration arose, and with a religion with a peculiar suspicion of nature, a suspicion of nature so complete that when it resolved itself into a dualism and defined its Satan, the power of Satan had to rest entirely within himself, and thus plants, as a tool of feminism, which was associated with Satanism and demonic magic, you bet your booties. Knowledge of plants completely disappeared on the European continent on any serious level. I'm talking now about ecstatic, visionary things. There were also botanical problems. The cold nature of Europe seems to give it a predisposition toward the tropanes, belladonna, the solanaceous plants that are not true psychedelics but really deliriants and frenzy-inducing kinds of nearly toxic super intoxicants. And with European civilization comes the fullest expression of male-dominated paternalism, which of course had been brought through from Judaism into earlier Christianity, but it reached its fullest expression in the feudal ideal and chivalry, which was the final degradation of women. Essentially, it carried out a process that had been going on since the fall of Mycenaean Greece. And with this comes an enormous legacy of neurosis and an enormous reluctance to be involved in the real, but rather to stratify and to remove, to dominate, and to abstract, leading to modern science, leading to the ability to answer all questions which are irrelevant. The further the question is from relevancy, the more likely you are to get an absolutely down to a gnat's eyebrow answer. Again, this tension between the need to center the human being in our models and the willingness to leave human beings completely out of the picture in order to answer a whole different set of questions. So I think it's a challenge to all of us, to each of us, to make this kind of an agenda count, to look into the future, to see that the image of what we are going to become is so important that we need to realize we are creating it by our acts, by our acquiescence in the acts of others as well. I mean, we are sitting through a particular period of idiocy, and there will be other periods of idiocy. But we can each move into the future, I think, at our own speed, at our own rate of understanding. The best ideas will win. It isn't a matter of great power. It's a matter of having the clearest image of the human soul, the clearest image of a historical goal that would be worthy enough to rescue meaning from the pile